Welcome to another lecture by MedicoMedics, Genetics Chapter 4, Mendelian Genetics. So in this lecture, we will talk about Mendel's experiments, Mendel's laws, dominant and recessive traits, mention Punnett squares, and talk about exceptions from and applications of Mendelian genetics, and end with a summary. Now, Mendelian genetics is about how traits like height or eye color are passed down from parents to offspring. And it is based on one of his famous pea plant experiments. Now, why is it important? Because it explains inheritance patterns and it forms the basis for modern genetics. So Mendel's experiments, the setup. Why pea plants? Because A, they are easy to grow. They have distinct traits like flower color and seed shape, and they can self-pollinate and or cross-pollinate. And the traits studied by Mendel included seed shape, so round versus wrinkled, seed color, yellow versus green, and flower color, purple versus white. So Mendel crossed tall pea plants with short ones and observed their offspring. And the reason he chose these pea plants is because they are simple and have clear traits, making them easy to study, or making it easy to study how traits are passed along. Now let's begin with his first law, which is the law of segregation. And the law of segregation states that an organism inherits two alleles for each trait, one from each parent. And during gamete formation, which is meiosis, these alleles separate so that each gamete, each sperm or egg, carries only one allele for a given trait. So each parent contributes one allele to the offspring, and these alleles can be dominant or recessive. And so an example here, if we have a tall plant expressed in the capital T, which means it's dominant, and we have a short plant in small t, this person will produce an offspring with big T and small t alleles, where the capital T is expressed because it's dominant. So if a tall T plant, right, is crossed with a short plant, small t, the offspring will inherit one allele from each parent. So the offspring will get T and T. Because T is dominant, the plant will be tall. But the recessive T, the little one, is still present and can appear in later generations if the offspring receives another of these small t's, which would make it 2. And that would then be a short plant. Then we have Mendel's second law here, the law of independent assortment. And it's defined as alleles for different traits are inherited independently of each other. So traits like eye color and hair type, etc., they don't always come as a package deal. They're passed on separately. So the inheritance of one trait, like flower color, doesn't necessarily affect the inheritance of another, like seed shape. So crossing plants with yellow, round seeds and green, wrinkled seeds can produce a mix of all combinations. Now let's talk about Punnett squares used to predict inheritance. So a Punnett square is a simple diagram used in genetics to predict the probability of offspring inheriting certain traits based on parental alleles. It visually represents Mendelian inheritance patterns for dominant and recessive traits. So how it works is you write parent alleles along the top and side, here and here. And then you fill in the squares to show possible offspring combinations. So tall and tall, and then you have tall and, well, dominant, tall, and short. So TT. You have the short variation with the big one, the dominant. So you get dominant T and T. And then you have recessive with recessive, and you get this one. So what's the genotype here? You can have TT, which is homozygous dominant. So it's going to be a tall person. You have dominant T with recessive. And here you will also have a tall person, but he will carry the recessive gene. But the expressed one is tall. And then you have, again, recessive plus dominant. You have, again, TT. So this is also tall. And then you have recessive and recessive, making it a short person. So the outcome of this would be that there is a 75% chance of being tall and 25% of being short. Now, dominant and recessive traits. So dominant alleles, traits that are expressed when present. So for example, capital T for tall plants. Meaning dominant traits win over recessive traits. But recessive traits can appear if both parents actually pass them on. So when we talk about dominant alleles, these are traits that are expressed when they are present. If we talk about recessive alleles, these are traits that are hidden unless both alleles are recessive. So unless we have that combination of T and T, it will remain hidden. Then we have the concept of homozygous versus heterozygous, or homozygous versus heterozygous. So if it's homozygous, both alleles are the same. So TT or TNT. If it's heterozygous, alleles are different. And so any variation where we have TNT, for example, this is a homozygous. And if the same with two recessives, but all the other combinations were heterozygous. So a child, for example, with one dominant brown eye allele and one recessive blue eye allele will have brown eyes. Now, there are, of course, exceptions to Mendel's laws, like incomplete dominance, so neither allele is completely dominant, resulting in a blend. For example, red and white flowers make pink. We have codominance, so both alleles are fully expressed. For example, blood type A and B. Multiple alleles, so more than two alleles for a trait. For example, blood types A, B, and O. Polygenic traits, so controlled by multiple genes like height, skin, and skin color. Example, a red and white flower cross results in a pink offspring. That's an example of incomplete dominance. So not all traits follow simple dominant recessive rules. Some traits mix or show multiple versions at once. What are some applications of Mendelian genetics? Well, in medicine, predicting risk of genetic disorders like cystic fibrosis. Agriculture, so breeding plants and animals for desired traits like pest-resistant crops. And forensics, using DNA inheritance patterns to solve crimes. Example, genetic testing helps parents understand the risk of passing on diseases like sickle cell anemia. So Mendelian genetics is used in healthcare, farming, and even crime solving to understand how traits and diseases are passed on. So in summary then, Mendel's experiments revealed two key principles. The law of segregation, so genes separate during gamete formation. And law of independent assortment, so traits are inherited independently. Traits can be dominant, recessive, or show variations like codominance or incomplete dominance. Tools like Punnett squares help predict and trace inheritance. And that's the end of chapter 4. Continue now to chapter 5. Thank you for listening.